Hi everyone. Crazy tough times at the moment. Self-isolation, disruption to everything we're doing. You know it's got bad in England when they've had to shut the pubs. It's even happened to my local, the Oaks, and the Globe, and the Sandpiper, and the Nelson, and the Ship, and the Rising Sun, and the Bear. We've heard about this fantastic new idea out of Japan. On-nomi means online drinking. Friends getting together, sharing a drink virtually when they couldn't share one together. So we've invited some of our friends, some of our PH ambassadors, some of the people we work with to have a chat and tell us how they're getting on in this crisis. Hello everyone, it's Andy Blow here from Precision Hydration, another On-nomi, which is our online drinks. And today we've got a very special guest, someone I'm delighted to be chatting to again. It's Alex Hutchinson, who many of you will know as the author of Endure, the Curiously Elastic Limits of Human Performance, which is genuinely one of our office's favourite books of the last few years, certainly, and also a regular contributor and author to Outside magazine. And Alex is sitting, I think, in Toronto in Canada. Is that right, Alex?
That's right. Thanks for having me, Andy.
No worries. And cheers, as it were.
Yeah. Cheers. Do you say on-nomi or what's the?
I don't actually know, but there you go. Cheers. Anyway, we started off, and this was doing my liver no good because I was drinking like every day, talking to people, and so we decided that we'd make it a bit more healthy now. So I've gone for mint tea today, and I think you said you've gone for the same.
Yeah, well, I was considering pulling out a beer, but due to the time difference, it is 3:00 in the afternoon here, and not that I'm going to get a ton done later this afternoon, but I thought I'd stick to the mint tea.
Stay productive. Exactly. Yeah. We're far enough in now that Chris and I were chatting before we came on here and said we're stopping with the midweek drinking now. We've kind of got to we've got to get beyond that. It's too much.
I have to say I've like tripled my, I don't even know what the factor is, tenfold increase in alcohol consumption since this quarantine. And I don't drink. I never drank a lot, and I'm still not drinking a ton. But it's like, yeah, now by the end of the day, with a house full of young kids and stuff, I'm ready to take the edge off before dinner. Definitely.
And the last time we spoke to you in depth was in Boulder, in Colorado. We were all there for the TrainingPeaks Summit, which was a really interesting few days. We listened with great interest to your keynote there and did a little interview at that point as well. And I just wanted to mention at this point that if anyone wants to read that interview, we talked about hydration and other things there. We'll put a link to that in this video, alongside the video as well. But going back to that time, it's not that long ago, and yet it seems like a really, really long time ago. The idea of getting on multiple flights to get somewhere and all that kind of thing. It's amazing how quick it's changed.
Yeah, we may look back on that and say that, that was the last endurance conference we went to for a long, long, long time. And, having so many people from different corners of that world in one room, it really, you can never predict the sort of serendipitous meetings that will happen when you have several hundred people in one place. And so that was great. I mean, the online stuff is great too, and I'm enjoying this, but I do miss the opportunities for just kind of bumping into people at a big conference like that.
Yeah, definitely. That's where we're feeling the pinch as an international company. It is already, it's sort of, I'm getting itchy feet. I mean, I've no intention of going and traveling anywhere, obviously, because it's physically impossible, but it kind of feels like there are opportunities slipping away while you're stuck having to talk to people online the whole time. Although, I feel like we're making the best of it and trying to, connect as much as we can through Hangouts and Zoom and stuff. Are you finding you're able to keep up with a lot of people that way?
Yeah, for sure. Like everyone else. And I think to put the silver lining on it, I think lots of people, including me, are discovering that actually there are some things you can do quite well online. And, even just thinking, I sometimes worry as a journalist, I travel quite a bit, and I worry about the sort of climate footprint of all that travel. Yeah. And I think along with many other people, are realizing, there are some things I could probably do without traveling. There are some and I think that will maybe be a lasting effect, that some of the stuff that we're now doing online we'll discover is perfectly good online. But I think not everything. I think there are some losses when you don't. I mean, a one-on-one meeting is one thing, but It's the meetings that you didn't expect to have. And like I was saying before, the sort of serendipitous bumping into someone you didn't even know you wanted to meet. That's hard to replicate online. You don't, as long as you're not getting Zoom bombing or whatever the expression for that is, you're not meeting people that you didn't expect to meet in these sort of online interactions.
No, that's very true. Now, you're an endurance athlete. We're all endurance athletes at PH as well. And one of the things that we've been talking about and thinking about a lot is the kind of potentially the detraining effect that's going on in the world of endurance at the moment with everyone. I suppose people have got time to train to an extent, but depending where you are in the world, a lot of our athletes in Spain can't even leave their houses. They can't go for a run. They're stuck, if they're lucky, with a treadmill and a bike. If they're unlucky, they've got absolutely nothing. There's certainly no swimming going on in the world of swimming and triathlon. What's your sort of high level thoughts on the detraining that's amongst us?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's obviously true that if you don't train, you get less fit. I think the way we sort of reassure ourselves under normal circumstances, it's always a battle with endurance athletes. You've just had the end of your season's over. You've trashed yourself to get to the end of the season. You need a break. Oh no, I can't take a break because I'm going to lose all my fitness. And you can reassure people that, look, if you take a week, you take 2 weeks, you take maybe even 3 weeks, you don't lose all that much in terms of the structural adaptations. The endurance training over the long term changes your body. It changes the size of your heart. It changes all sorts of things that are structural, and they don't disappear. You lose some sharpness. You lose some of the neuromuscular things relatively quickly, but they also, the things that you lose quickly are the things that also come back quickly. And the things that you lose, the things that take a long time to get back also take a long time to fade away for the most part. Now, that's less reassuring when we start. So that's, in mid-March, when it's like, we're going to have a lockdown until the beginning of April. And it's like, it doesn't matter. Those few weeks don't matter. Once you start sort of staring down this sort of uncertain endpoint, then like if you can't train for the way you'd like to for 2 or 3 months, you're going to lose fitness. Now, I will also say the sort of famous thing that people also remind, you talk to great Kenyan Olympic champions and they're taking like 5 weeks, 6 weeks off. And when they say it off, it's not like off. The people that I train with, when they say off, they're like, well, I didn't do any real interval workouts. I didn't put my spikes on. So it was off. I still ran, 90K last week, but it was easy. Like the Kenyans are taking 5 weeks completely off and they're doing fine. So for the most part, I don't think people should stress about it, but obviously we're all going to go nuts if we can't train to, like, I really, really have sympathy for the people who are under tighter lockdowns than I'm under.
Yeah, that's the hard thing, isn't it? For the mental health side of things, if you can't get out and like have your daily dose, basically your medicine, if you like. One interesting perspective I got on that, talking on one of these chats to Sarah Crowley, the triathlete. Sarah was 3rd in Kona last year, so she's one of the top Ironman athletes in the world. And I said, what do you think about all this? You've got uncertainty, you've got downtime now and all the rest of it. And she came back with a really kind of interesting and positive spin on it, that she said, look, for me, I might lose a lot of this year in my career, but I actually see this as probably something that will extend my career on the back end, because endurance athletes, she said she's been smashing it for years and never had a proper bit of downtime. So she was like, well, this is it. This is going to rejuvenate me going forward.
I think that's a great perspective. Yeah. And I think it's especially, again, just sort of going back to the contrast between the Kenyan champions and the people I train with. I think certainly the culture here in North America there's fearful of taking time off, fearful of losing a step, and even when it would be really beneficial. So and I've been looking sometimes at recently I've written some articles about masters athletes and what distinguishes people who are really able to keep going at or have exceptional performances when they're older. And usually you look at some of the trajectories and it's like, they had some time off. They saved their legs. They weren't Ron Hill going at it every day for 50 years. There's this guy, Tommy Hughes, who just ran, a guy from Northern Ireland, I think, who ran a 2:27 marathon at age 59.
Yes, I read about that. Yeah.
Yeah, he was an Olympic marathoner in '92, and then he took a bunch of time off and came back. And who knows what he would have done? Like, we don't know what he would have done if he trained the whole time. But the reason he's able to smash it in his late 50s, or one reason may be that he had a break. Now, is 6 months of plague quarantine going to make us all Masters champions? Probably not. But yeah, I think especially for an elite athlete where the time frame is much compressed, it's like, how many years do you have at the top? Save your legs for a bit.
Yeah, well, and especially the fact that it's non-negotiable. It is one of those things where I guess you do the one thing you can exert some choice over is how do you treat it? Do you treat it as like a really negative thing every day that adds to your stress that you can't do it, or do you just go like Sarah seems to be doing and saying, I'm going to train, but I'm also going to chill and I'm going to sort of like rejuvenate a little bit. I think that's a really we're lucky that we interact as a business with a lot of really elite athletes. And I think what I've been amazed by is without any sort of, these people are not putting on a front. They're dealing with this really actually quite well. And is that because they're elite athletes, or is that part of why they're elite athletes? I think that, and you've looked a lot into the mental side of being a great athlete. So I wonder whether, being a good endurance athlete in some ways equips you to deal with this as well.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. As you're saying that, I was flashing to a paper I just read on a completely different topic. So let me make a segue, but hopefully that is related. It was about napping in elite athletes. So it's well established, and there's been studies and everything that a lot of elite athletes nap. And compared to more than in the general population. And the assumption is that that's because they're tired. They're not getting enough sleep. They're training so hard. And so this study that I just read, and since I just read it, I can't remember who did it. So my apologies, but it said, well, no one's ever checked. Do they nap more because they're sleepy or just because they're good at napping? And so they actually compared elite athletes and sub-elite athletes and non-athletes, but matched in other characteristics. They found that sure enough, the elite athletes napped them, or if you brought them into the lab, they were able to fall asleep the quickest. The sub-elites were next, and the normal people were worst. But the ratings of sleepiness were not different. In fact, the elite athletes were less sleepy and perhaps even more likely to have had a good night of sleep the night before. So they were concluding that elite athletes are nappers not because they're always tired necessarily, but because they're good at, if you give them an opportunity to nap, they're good at falling asleep. And they then they start getting to speculating, like, is it because they're able to turn off their hyperarousal? They're able to deal with the situation. They're able to stop worrying about things and just fall asleep. Is this a skill? Yeah. So anyway, that makes me think of the question of how do you respond to a curtailment of training? Maybe this is, again, another one of these mental skills that elite athletes have either learned to get better at or started out better at, that they're able to deal with adversity, reframe it, just like they have to do in a race. If something goes wrong in a race, they're able to handle that and not sort of spiral out of control or rage against something that they can't change.
Definitely. Yeah, no, I think like I say, it's a common characteristic of all the elites that I've spoken to, and they appear to be dealing with the lack of training a lot better than some of those people that take their sport super seriously but are not quite elite. They're the ones that are getting all stressed about it and trying to figure out crazy ways to keep their levels where they're at, when I think the sensible thing is to accept a little bit less. Out of interest, because I know you keep yourself pretty fit with running and stuff, what's your training regime look like now that you're at home? Yeah,
it's I mean, I should say I work from home all the time, right? So not a lot has changed for me explicitly, except that the races that I planned to run are no longer are happening. So I was going to run the London Marathon last weekend, and I'll admit I sort of breathed a sigh of relief when it was canceled because I wasn't in great shape. But I ran I did a 5K solo virtual race time trial this past weekend, along with pretty much everyone, not with everyone I train with, but synchronized with the people who I used to train with. And so we all got on a Zoom call yesterday afternoon and argued over who won via age grading and who had a good race and who got tailwind by choosing a course along the lake shore and all these sorts of things. And so that, and the funny thing is, once we did that, I finished that call and I was cursing myself for not having taken the the time trial or the race a little more seriously, because it is hard I'm finding I'm still doing the same stuff I do normally, a tempo run on Saturday, some intervals in the middle of the week, run 6 days a week. But it's getting a little easier to shortchange the intensity a little bit. It's hard to be without knowing that there's a test at the end. There's some measurement of how it's going. It gets a little harder to keep that last bit of intensity in, but yeah, I'm still doing my typical routine.
Do you normally do your harder workouts with other people, or are they solo efforts anyway?
So, I mean, I'm in Toronto, where I've lived on and off for a long time, so I have a lot of people to run with, but I live out now in the West End with my family, and it's a little harder for me to get downtown. I can't meet for interval workouts on Tuesday and Thursday afternoons, where a lot of my friends are meeting. But both my wife and I my wife's a runner too. We've basically moved heaven and earth over the last 5 years to keep Saturday morning as a time when we can get together with our respective groups of runner friends and do a tempo run. So we have a standing Saturday morning tempo run at 9:15 a.m. downtown. We use our precious childcare resources, our parenting resources. Saturday mornings is when we need you. Like anywhere else, anytime else is a bonus, but Saturday mornings we need to have our tempo run. And it's a unbelievable difference for me trying to do the same tempo run alone versus how it feels to do with half a dozen friends.
Yeah, because I noticed you wrote a piece that came out in Outside about that topic today, where it had been studied, and they did there was a trial of 10K runners, and they ran, I think it was 2 10K runs within a week of each other. Some were together, weren't they, and some were alone. And they universally, basically, the bottom line was they went faster in the group than on their own.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I mean, I don't think anyone would be surprised to hear that, right? Like you go faster with other people, I mean, there's other effects in races too, like crowds, but even just the presence of other people helps you go faster and makes it feel a little easier. What was interesting about this study is they went beyond the usual, a lot of studies look at perception of effort. So they ask you, how hard does this feel on a scale of say 1 to 10? And so obviously things felt a little easier that allowed them to push harder, in the group setting. But this study also looked at affective feelings. So they say how positive or how negative, how good or bad do you feel on a scale of 1 to 10?
Yeah.
And endurance athletes, serious endurance athletes know that hard and good are not the same thing. You can have a run that feels very hard, but also feels good, or a run that feels easy, but feels bad. And so they were saying, they were trying to separate those two things. Okay, we know tell us how hard and easy it is, but also tell us how good and bad you feel. And the biggest difference between the solo and the group 10K trials was how bad people felt in the solo one, progressively worse as the thing went on. It's not fun. You're doing this hard thing, and it's just a different thing when you're all by yourself. Although there's huge variability. There are people who do better by themselves, but for most people, having other people around it is just so much better.
Did I understand right in the write-up as well? There was a few people dropped out of the group running trial, and and part of the hypothesis was maybe if they're sort of like if you're running with a group and you're dropping off the back or whatever, or you're not having a good running comparison to those, only that compounds it, because that would definitely be like my personal feeling on it. Because when you're in a group and you're one of the front runners and feeling good, the group gives you energy, and when you're off the back of a group and struggling, and all this, the kind of group takes you energy.
Yeah, I think so. And I think that's why there's so much variability in the group response and in the sort of good, bad feeling is when you're alone, your feelings are dictated by what's going on in your head, basically, and in your body. So there's a pretty good matchup between how hard you're running and how good or bad you feel. When you're with the group, all of a sudden you're much more externally focused, and that can cut both ways for sure. For the most part, it's better that you're thinking about the people around you and you're looking around and externally focused. But yeah, if you're looking around at the people around you and they're all 20 meters in front of you and getting farther away, all of a sudden that can turn into a more negative thing rather than a more positive thing. So it's definitely not the case that it's always better or always easier to have other people around you. It's kind of and that's kind of again the magic of the group that I've been meeting with for a couple decades now on Saturday mornings. is those people are well matched. They're my friends, and they're also, it's a mix every day. Some people are strong, some people are weak, or every week rather. But there's people to run with, so it's a good match where it's not just me going out and being 10 minutes behind everybody else.
Yeah, because that is always, if you're always off the front or always off the back, it becomes that little bit of variance is always really good. Now I remember listening to your talk at TrainingPeaks, and you talked specifically about one of the early experiences you had as a runner, getting interested in the mental side of performance. When I can't remember whether it was a 1500 meter race or a mile race, but you were running and they called the wrong lap times so that you thought you were running faster than you were, and then you went on to sort of like obliterate your personal best, which you've been trying to chip away at for ages. Now I had an experience not exactly the same. In fact, it's quite a bit different in one sense, but my running coach when I was younger was a guy called Paul Hart, who coached a lot of decent British marathon runners and stuff. And sadly, Paul died all of a sudden. He had a heart attack in his 50s, and there was a group of us that were coaching, and it was a big shock. It was probably, as a young person, it was probably the biggest shock, negative shock I'd had in my life at that point. And a group of us went to the track about a few days after he died, and to do a session, because he'd actually already planned the session that we were going to do. So a few people were like, right, let's go and do the session. And I ran that session, and it was really interesting because a couple of people couldn't hardly do it. And I ran so fast, like times that are just, with almost like you said, the difference between hard and bad. Like I ran so hard, but it didn't feel bad. And I could just run. It almost felt like there was no limit. I could just run faster and faster and faster. And it was like there's like a disconnect from the brain. It was like there was a disconnection from the brain. You can just push yourself all of a sudden. And it came and went really fast. But I always remembered it. And then when you spoke about your experience, it kind of, I don't know whether that's a version of the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think it certainly kind of speaks to the way that what feels like sort of, we all like to think that we're running or cycling or whatever the case may be, pushing to the limits of our body's capability. Then something changes that changes your perspective. Something that just changes your mental approach, and all of a sudden it's different. And like you said, with your training partners, some of them could barely run, and you had wings. It's like everyone responds differently to those specific cues. It's just like when people ask about running with music and things like that. It's like, well, there's no one song that makes people faster. The song that psychs you up and makes you remember this great moment may be the song that somebody else's girlfriend broke up with them over. Yeah. And so it's very hard to generalize, but the fact that those things happen, and I think probably most people have stories along those lines where it's like something changed and it wasn't something physical, and all of a sudden they were 10 times better, 10 times worse. So I think it's all part of the same thing.
The switch got flicked. Do you, on that point about music, or do you ever run with music?
I don't. I'm a bit of a Luddite. I have a watch that tells me the time, and a stopwatch. It counts seconds, but it doesn't do anything more than that. It doesn't store anything. It doesn't. I don't have a GPS or anything. And if I was in a different place in my competitive journey, I might have a GPS watch, but at the moment I don't, and I don't have any device that would play music to me that wouldn't feel like it weighed like 50 pounds. I can't carry my phone with me. It's inconceivable to me. Yeah.
Old school runner. I actually used to be a lot like that. The thing that changed it for me was when I started traveling a lot and running. I often took to taking my phone with me as a navigation aid, right. If I was in the city or something. And then what I found really weird, and the reason I brought it up is pre sort of coronavirus, I couldn't run and kind of listen to much. I'd listen to music occasionally, but largely I would take it in nav or whatever. And then recently what I've found is that because I think I'm running a little bit easier, but I'm using that time to listen to podcasts and things. I think maybe I've lost my driving time and my traveling time, which is when I used to listen. So I've tried to find time in my day, but also I've found it really, I never thought I could concentrate on that stuff when I was running. And if I run easy enough, I kind of can. But I get to the point where I have to stop and then like rewind things when I get home, because I realize if I did a run the other day where I finished and I decided to do a fast kilometer at the end. And then I realized I'd like not listen to anything from about half a kilometre out when I decided I was going to go fast, right through it. I hadn't heard a thing. It had been playing the whole time.
It is interesting because there's actually a little bit of research, because everyone says, and okay, I want to back up here a little bit before I get, before I say anything that will make me extremely unpopular. I'm not against running with music or podcasts or anything. It's I'm a whatever floats your boat kind of guy. There is a little bit of research that suggests that when people run with music, and I assume the same thing is true for podcasts, which is a more recent sort of thing that's become popular. It makes the run or the exercise feel easier. And part of the reason it makes it feel easier is that we tend to slow down. We have finite attentional focus. And so you start listening, and they found it's even more powerful if you're watching a video, like if you're in the gym on a treadmill watching a video. The more engaged you are in what you're listening to or watching, the easier it feels, but also the slower your self-selected pace goes. Yeah. So unless you're on a treadmill where you're forcing yourself to go at a given pace, you tend to slow down, which is, I mean, it sort of relates to me to, there's all this research about, facial expressions and exercise. And, I've written a bunch of times about it, about, if you smile or if you have a pleasant expression on your face, your body interprets that as the fact as, hey, maybe we're not working so hard, so it doesn't feel so hard. But every time I experiment with that, I find that, I'll be running, let's say I'm doing a tempo run, I'll notice, oh yeah, I do have this crazy grimace on my face. I don't need to do that. I can relax my face into a smile. Like, oh yeah, this does feel easier. I feel so much more relaxed. Check the next split. It's like, oh, I slowed down by 30 seconds a kilometer. No wonder I felt like there's a connection between the feeling of being relaxed and being relaxed, or the feeling of being distracted and being distracted. So it's tough to navigate those things. And I think it can, I don't think there's necessarily one answer always, that it always works this way for everybody. Some people may be able to listen to music, especially energizing music, and not slow down at all. But for a lot of people, I think focusing on one thing, there's no free lunch. If you're focusing on one thing, you're not as focused on the other thing.
Yeah, I think that's one of it's not been the most deliberate tactic I've used to do it, but one of the things with my running is I've typically ran quite a bit, not as much as you, not as much as 6 days a week in recent years because I had knee surgery and things like that. So I've tended to mix it up with a lot of swimming as well. And having had that taken away, I've been like, right, one of the first things I said to myself, if I'm going to run most days, I've got to wind it back a bit, because if I ping my calf in the first 3 weeks of lockdown, this is going to get really ugly for everyone around me, and it's for myself, because I did that in January and had 6 weeks of kind of hobbling, and it was just unpleasant. But I was so glad that I timed it so that I've been on the comeback now. But it's been and by having those things to listen to, I've definitely felt like that kind of puts a lid on it a little bit, because it consumes some of that attention. Next thing you've written extensively about, and I didn't realize you were going to run London Marathon actually before you'd said so, but I wanted to chat a little bit about running shoes. And when you were going to run London, were you going to run in a pair of the Vaporfly shoes?
Oh, no, a highly sensitive question.
Yeah,
I had more or less made my peace with the idea of doing that. I have a pair of the original Vaporflies from 2.5 years ago that I got as a review pair that I've only run in once. I ran a 5K in it maybe 2 years ago, and because I just didn't feel right wearing them. But I finally got the sense that, they're so ubiquitous now, and I'm so not prepared for the last 10K of a marathon that maybe putting on these big blocks of foam will be defensible and worthwhile. But now that the marathon has passed and I didn't do it, I'm tempted to start claiming that I was never going to run on them in the first place.
Yeah, I thought it was an interesting question, because I know that I've read a lot of your opinion on them, and I've read a lot of other people's opinion, and my opinion is definitely pretty mixed on them as well, because technologically they're obviously fantastic, but ethically and all the rest of it, how does it sit? And I was listening to I was listening to an audiobook this morning, which was the start of Skin in the Game by Nicholas Nassim Taleb, and he said something really quite interesting, which was like, if you're talking to someone about stocks and investments and things, don't ask them what they think you should do. Ask them what's in their portfolio. And I thought, what I'll do, I can start asking runners, not whether they think people should run in the Vaporflies or not, but if they've got competition coming up or not, are they going to run in them? Because I said I would not buy a pair, And people that know me know that I am like a real shoe guy. I've got lots of pairs of running shoes and other shoes and, and stuff. And I said, I'm not going to get some. And then I was in Australia in January this year. And because of the Aussie dollar and the UK pound, they were like significantly cheaper. They were about $100 cheaper.
Wow.
And I just found myself like handing over the money in a shop and buying them. And I haven't run in them because at that time I had a calf injury. Then there's been no racing. But I'm now thinking to myself, of course, if a race comes up, I'm going to wear them because I've got them in the closet now. So, yeah. And that's what you said. They're ubiquitous. Yeah.
Well, yeah. And I think, so, yeah. So in terms of this idea of, don't ask what they think you should buy, ask what they hold. I think that's great. I'll give a countervailing perspective from my own account, which is I actually really try not to try out the things that I write about in a lot of cases. Because then what I'll be writing about is, did I like it? Did it feel good on my feet? Did I like the color? Did it look cool to me or whatever? And in this whole Vaporfly debate, you can see from a mile away the tribalism of the debate. People are pro Nike or anti Nike, and so their assessment of whether the shoes are fair is obviously influenced by that. Their assessment of whether the shoes work is influenced by that, and that's ridiculous. Like, you're in theory, your decision about whether there's evidence that the shoes work should have nothing to do with whether you think Nike is the source of all evil. So. That plays out in a lot of contexts in writing about sports technology and thinking about it. People, we all, it's natural, it's human. We develop attachments to the things that we use and that we like, and so we then try and process our perceptions through our experiences. So I actually try. I don't take, for the most part, review products. I try not to. I try to see my role as not reviewing a product, but writing about the evidence about a technology. Now, with these Vaporflies, they came not from Nike, but from Runner's World, and they arrived just before I left Runner's World. So they sent them to me, and then I had left Runner's World, so I couldn't write about them for Runner's World, and I'd moved to Outside. I couldn't write about them for Outside because I got them from Runner's World. So they sat in my closet. They've sat in my closet for 2.5 years, and I've worn them just once because I was like, okay, you know what, I should check out what they feel like. But I do think, like you were saying, and like I was saying, the landscape has changed a little bit. It's no longer there are these things that nobody can get their hands on. It's no longer that there's it's an unfair advantage over everyone who doesn't want to, especially for a recreational runner like me at this point. I still have misgivings about whether I think they should be part of the sport, but I'd be less ashamed to wear them now than I would have been 2 years ago, but it's still something I was wrestling with for sure. Yeah.
And have you kept your eye on the other competitor products that have been coming out? It's not actually an area with the lack of focus on competition. I think my focus has drifted away from it, but I know that people like Hoka, and I've heard about prototypes from Adidas and ASICS have got something which allegedly Jan Frodeno wore in Hawaii and so on and so forth. Have you seen or heard anything interesting else that's going on in that space?
Yeah, I did a little piece for a Canadian Running Magazine that just looked at what some of the other options were. So that was something I hadn't really been following closely. And pretty much everyone's got an option, and they've all taken different kind of spins on what they're trying to achieve. With everyone needs a shoe with a carbon fiber plate and some fancy foam, but not everyone is trying to do the same thing as Nike. One thing that I will say Nike did, and I appreciated, was that they had data on the shoe was so good that they sent it out and had publicly available data, peer-reviewed data on how good it was. Everyone else is coming out with their shoes now. We'll give it time, but no one is providing the testing yet. Now, if I had to pick a shoe based on stuff I've heard informally from other people and anecdotal reports, I would say the Saucony competitor appears to have, maybe the best shot of matching Nike's the Vaporfly, the Next Percent's performance. But until we see a study with 10 people in it or more, it's hard to say for sure. But yeah, there's some other companies that are maybe going to, get the playing field back within shouting distance of level. And Saucony looks like one to watch out for. Yeah.
Okay. I'll have a look into those. Before that, if we go into the sort of pre-Vaporfly era of running shoes, with the pre 4% stuff, what were your favorite sort of standout running shoes in your career? What do you have fond memories of running in?
Yeah, so again, much like my sort of tech Ludditeness, I was a big fan of sales. So whatever was on sale, it's what I ran in. So I've run in shoes from pretty much every company, and in a lot of cases, I have shoes that for any given company, there were shoes that I loved and shoes that I hated. If there's probably the shoe that I bought most. The single shoe model that I have purchased most frequently over the years was the New Balance 1400 and its successors. I can't remember if it's become like 1410 or 14 something else. It's a kind of, I don't know, either a heavy racing flat or a very light training shoe. And I really love that for workouts and tempo runs. And I'm less picky about what I've run in just for easier mileage. I'm actually a believer in rotating, in having more than one model of shoe on the go at 100%. Any given moment, so you're not doing the same running this with the same stride at all times. But if I had to pick one shoe that I was fond of over the years and have even paid full price for on multiple occasions, that would be the New Balance 1400.
Good, and I'm really glad to hear that you're another shoe rotator, because I've been speaking even years ago, because I've been a persistent calf injury person throughout my running career. And I think that's got a little bit to do with physiology and biomechanics, and a lot to do with, kind of, I guess, not always grasping training load and being enthusiastic a lot of the time, but the kind of two go hand in hand. But one technique that I picked up pretty early on was like having, for me, it was shoes with a different degree of drop in them. So like when our calves are tight and sore, I've got shoes which are a lot more jacked up and a lot softer and that kind of thing. And then when I'm feeling a bit springier and lighter, I can go for flatter and lighter and thinner shoes. And I think I almost exclusively never run two back-to-back runs in the same footwear for that reason, to spice it up a little bit. And that partly it helps me to explain to my wife why we have a full shoe rack of running shoes right next to the front door at all times.
Well, it's pretty bad. I both my sort of heavy shoes and my light shoes were kind of reaching the end of their useful life in the last month, but they're not so dead that I want to get rid of them. But I've brought in a new heavy shoe and a new light shoe, and so I've got at least 4 pairs of shoes sitting. It's quite a clutter. But the new lighter shoe I brought in has I think it's a Saucony, maybe the Liberty or something. It has a 4mm drop, and that's lower than what I usually go to. And I think it's good for me, but it's also, I've noticed if I do a hard run in that shoe, then the next day my calves are a little bit complaining. And I'm sure glad that I'm not trying to run another run in the same shoe, because by balancing it out, and I think, sometimes by getting outside my comfort zone like that, running in a shoe that's unfamiliar to me, I think that's actually a net good in the long run, to make sure I'm not sort of calcifying into one sort of motion. Yeah,
that's quite funny what you said about the old shoes coming in. The new shoes coming in, the old ones not quite leaving. Because out the front of my house at the moment, because we've been on lockdown, we've got a big, it's called a hippo bag, which is basically like a soft collapsible skip because you can't take your trash away at the moment. You can put it in one of these and they come and pick it up and take it away. And I was forced to throw a couple of pairs of like my old running shoes into there. And then I went and I thought they've gone. And then my brother phoned me up and he said, because he lives not far from me, and he came and he said, because he's the same shoe size, and he said, I came past your hippo bag the other day and some shoes, and he's now out running in them. He said they've got loads of life left in them. So he's got real.
One man's trash is another man's gold, I guess.
Exactly, yeah. So I'm going to see what else. I'm going to put some more stuff out there for him tomorrow and see what else gets cleared away. Couple more quick questions for you while we're on the subject of running and the marathons being cancelled. We know that Berlin's now gone for this year. And there was talk today online, which I didn't get a chance to read the details of, but it sounded like they weren't ruling out making London an elite-only race later in the year. Do you see a separation of elite marathons and mass races in the next 18 months, 2 years even, and how do you think that plays out, and how have you got any ideas or any insights into how we might return to sort of bigger events, with like split start, because people have been talking about rolling starts and split starts and all that kind of stuff, but it all sounds a bit fragmented to me.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have any deep insights here. My crystal ball is not giving me any good information, but I really, I was signed up to run London, and so I've transferred my entry so that I'm signed up to run the revised London in October.
Yeah.
But I have a hard time imagining how that can. I mean, I hate to be a pessimist. I have a hard time seeing how these kinds of events can go forward. And it's one thing, like Tokyo did earlier this year, to go ahead with an elite-only race. But the truth is, these events they generate public interest and they generate revenue only insofar as they're these massive events where there's 50,000 people paying entry fees. There's 50,000 people serving as a captive audience to advertisers, to sponsors, I mean, I love the sport. Obviously, I would happily spend a day watching, or spend my fall watching an elite-only Boston followed by an elite-only London and elite-only Berlin. It would be heaven. But I don't know that the events are feasible like that. And I mean, I guess as a placeholder, just so that it preserves the continuity of the event, so that a year from now, if we're back to it. But in terms of the sort of halfway measures of what do you do, like, you have staggered starts and stuff like that. I mean, I guess that's, look, maybe that's part of a staged return, but I mean, these events are the definition of, you think of the starting pens of a major marathon. You're packed beside people for a long period of time, and you'd have to make a substantial alteration in the logistics to make that work. And I think, I mean, I guess big events like London are oversubscribed to the extent that even if 50% of the people decide, hell no, I don't want to go through that, then maybe they'd still fill up as many spots as they're able to open up.
I think as well, though, it's got as much to do with the fact that these things are international. You've got people coming in from X amount of countries, and we don't know what's going to happen with kind of immunity passports and getting everyone together on public transportation to get to and from the starts. And I'm thinking already, because we were supposed to be there with a booth at the London Marathon Expo, and we've rolled that forward to the perceived rescheduled date, but increasingly thinking to ourselves, well, that's unlikely to happen. And I even caught us having a conversation the other day about the fact that, well, if we go and do that, we're only going to send half of the office team, and we might have to keep those people in quarantine for 2 weeks when they finish on the stand. And you start thinking, hang on a minute, is it really worth? Do we want to do that? Is that worth it? So there are it's a lot of sort of like fairly tough considerations going to have to come up. And if you want to run the London Marathon for elites, can you really run that course? Is it really justifiable to run a rolling road closure or whatever around that much of a major capital city just so that 50 people can run? One thing I do understand, though, is like you said, I think you said the phrase placeholder, because it is important sometimes just to kind of try to carry on a little bit to keep the spirit of it going, and I definitely see that, but that's probably the only justification.
Yeah, I was thinking, in terms of going and putting a booth together, for example, you're unlikely to achieve much in the long run, but maybe you generate some goodwill of like, those guys were there when going was a losing proposition. But
because that's one of the reasons we had a long conversation, because the London Marathon offered us the vast majority of our money back at this stage, which to us as a small business at the moment would be very useful, because we've taken a massive revenue hit. Sales are down, we've got wages to pay and all that kind of stuff. But on that one, we were like, do you know what? We're going to try and we want to be optimistic and show some solidarity. And we said, well, actually, what we'll do is we'll roll it forward to the next event, because I understand that in business it's not just about what's incoming. It's like people have got to participate in the economy. You've got to, because if we lose confidence and we don't do anything, then it really does come to a screeching, grinding halt, and that's what we're trying to avoid. So, yeah, like you say, though, I think even the optimistic part of me is wondering now what's going to happen. But we can look back at this recording in 3 or 4 months' time and see,
Yeah, I mean,
if we were right.
Put it this way: any predictions I would have made a month ago would have been totally off. Like, you know, I had no idea what's today, April 27th. I had no idea what April 27th would look like on March 27th. So,
agreed.
Maybe 27th will be better than we expect, and maybe June and July and August. Maybe it's not all going to be roses, but maybe things are going to move quicker. But I think we certainly have to be psychologically and logistically prepared for the fact that actually the fall marathon season might be toast. I hope not. I really hope not. But it's there's some difficult decisions coming up for sure.
Cool. Last question, Alex. I know you want to get back to proper work here, but kids in lockdown. You've got I think you said a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old. I've got a 3-year-old and a 6-year-old at home. So, you know, we've already admitted we're drinking way more than we probably know is good for us. That's one great top tip for coping, which I'm fully on board with. What's been your best sort of 2 or 3 things or 2 or 3 tips for, because there's a lot of parents in lockdown and we're listening to this.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there have been some tough moments, lots of tough moments, but there have been some great moments as a result of having time at home with the kids and you know, saying goodbye to some productivity. But the coolest thing is my daughter, just before she turned 4, my younger daughter turned 4 a couple of weeks ago, and before that, 2 weeks before that, we taught her to ride a bike, which we didn't think was going to happen till maybe later this summer if we were lucky. But we had all the time in the world, so we just sat out there with her bike, and she mastered it. And now we're going on like the long-awaited dream of family bike rides. I think we've been 7K a couple times with the younger one on her tiny little bike.
Fantastic.
And so that's been really like exciting, honestly. Like, we've been waiting for that moment for a long time, because pulling that trailer
I can give you a virtual high five on that one, because I've had exactly the same experience.
Oh, good.
Both of my kids have picked up bikes and ridden them in the last 3 or 4 weeks. And I actually, one of my dreams was go for a run with the kids, or one of the kids at least, riding with me. And I managed to go out and run 7-minute miles with my little boy. I mean, we picked a nice flat route with lots of nothing too dangerous and, you know, all the rest of it. But we cranked out a little run, 3 or 4 miles, and ride and run, which was really cool. And he absolutely loved it. And the only person who loved it more was me, I think. So these are special moments. And you know, another thing we did is with the kids, we got some sticks and hammered them together and made tiny little boats, you know, like a foot long. Took them down to the river, put them in the river, and ran alongside the river watching them. So stuff that maybe we would have done this summer anyway, but we are finding, I mean, 99% of the time is challenging and indoors and all that, but the 1% of the time when we're getting out and doing, having some adventures outside in a socially distanced and responsible way, it's been nice. And I'm sure the kids I'll remember this for a long time, as long as my memory doesn't fail me, but the kids will remember it for a long time too. We've had a lot of quality time together. Yeah, no, it's good. We've also had, you know, sort of on the other side of it, a couple of like totally memorable tantrum episodes, particularly at the moment. We're getting one around my daughter who's 3 and a bit, has decided, I mean, it's been quite warm in the UK recently. It's been close to 18, 19 Celsius. We've had lovely weather. It's been unseasonably great, which has been fantastic for us. But she will not leave the house without Wellington boots on at the moment, no matter what we're going to do. And then we'll always complain when we get halfway down the road that she's got hot, sweaty feet. So I don't know quite how I'm going to deal with that one going forward, but at least it looks like it's going to rain the next few days, so she will have the right footwear if she continues in this theme.
Even a broken clock is right occasionally. Exactly,
that's the one. Great. Well, thanks so much, Alex. I always enjoy chatting, and you know, really enjoyed this conversation. I'll remind people that the book On-nomi, indeed, if that's what we're going to do. I'll remind people that if they've got if they're running out of other things to do, not that it should be, lower down the list, but reading or listening to Endure would be a really good thing for them to do in their downtime. I'm sure it's still available I know it's on Audible because that's where I got it from.
If you're totally out of things to do, that is if you're considering that or just lying on the floor staring at the ceiling, that's where to go.
Yeah, well, it's already the copies that we got have already gone around our office, and we've mailed them out to other people to read in their downtime. So hopefully that'll carry it on for you. But no, thanks again, and if it happens, we'll love to have a proper drink with you at the London Marathon later in the year.
Sounds great. Thanks a lot, Andy.
Cheers,
Appreciate
Alex.
the comfort.
No worries. Bye-bye.